the two members that are here with us today. So Lupe, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Erika. My name is Guadalupe Mendez. I'm the youth organizer here at Juntos. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I am a born and raised South Philadelphia resident, and I'm happy to be here. And I will pass it to Ashley. I think she had to fix some audio issues.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ashley Tellez. My pronouns are she and her. My role at Juntos is a junior organizer. I've been working as part of community member at Juntos since I was 12, and I go to school here in South Philly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we've prepared a presentation for y'all today. It's going to be an overview of Latinx immigrant communities here in Philadelphia, how our communities are threatened by ICE enforcement and detention, and a specific detailed dive into our education justice campaign, Sanctuary Schools, which better outlines how as educators, you can better advocate for immigrant students, parents, and their families. So we're just going to get started. Here's our initial slide. Again, we're really excited to be here. If you can hop over to the next slide, Lupe. Here's our team here today. Juntos is a community-led organization, so we wanted to make sure it was more than just one voice that you were hearing today. And as both Lupe and Ashley mentioned, they are both lifelong residents of Philadelphia, and so come to this presentation with experiences not only living in South Philly, but also attending South Philadelphia schools. Great, pass it over to you, Ashley.
Hi everyone again. So a little bit about Juntos. Juntos is a community-led Latinx immigrant organization here in South Philly. We fight for the rights of the human rights as workers, parents, youth, and immigrants. Juntos combines our leadership development, community organizing, and we collaborate with a bunch of other organizations around Philadelphia to build stronger leadership and make sure that our community has a voice, and to make sure that we have our needs met in fighting against these systems of oppression.
And at Juntos, we do this in a variety of different ways. We believe that fighting injustice actually requires more than just one tool. And the three tools that we have outlined at Juntos is community organizing, which is composed of leadership development of community members, and active rapid response based on the realities that our community members face. More specifically, we have two organizing campaigns, one of which is Sanctuary Schools, which we'll go into detail throughout the presentation. And the other one is ICE out of Pennsylvania. That ICE means Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and that is our specific anti-detention campaign. Education program includes after-school program for youth, which Ashley has been a part of since she was 12, but also includes arts and culture workshops and classes for adults. And our last and also really pivotal key area of work that we want to make sure to mention so that you can also share with your families and your students is our community care branch, which includes essentially our mutual aid work. It is composed of casework, so everything from detention cases to eviction to help accessing social services, along with a weekly food bank and a diaper bank that is open all the time and open to anyone.
All right. So I wanted to cover why we use the term Latinx or Latine. We use this term to include all members of our community. There are members in our community that do not identify with the term Latino or Latina based on their many identities that they hold, specifically kind of challenging the machismo in our community, because in Spanish, our language is very gendered. And so we use Latinx or Latine to combat and create a safe space for our community that don't feel comfortable with identifying with Latino or Latina.
And just to quickly begin, Juntos is a Latinx immigrant rights organization. So we thought it was important as part of this presentation to talk about the different Latinx immigrant communities that exist in Philadelphia. One thing I want to name is that we're a large portion of the city. We're comprised of nearly 250,000 people in the city of Philadelphia, which is nearly 15%. The majority of the Latino population in general is comprised of the Puerto Rican community, which was one of the original Latinx immigrant groups before the residents of the island were granted citizenship in 1917. But other major groups included the folks from the Dominican Republic, communities from Mexico, and then the more recently arrived groups of immigrants from Central America, which include countries like El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And as part of the work today, we do want to outline, at Juntos, we primarily serve the Latinx immigrant community in South Philadelphia, but we do have visitors from all over the city. And a big emphasis of our work is supporting those who are newly arrived in Philadelphia, which to detail really quickly, again, are folks from Mexico, Central America, but also anyone who faces language barriers in any social institution in the city of Philadelphia.
Yes, and to briefly go over some history of the waves of immigration here in South Philly that we've seen throughout in the last 20 years. So in the mid to late 1990s, we saw a very large wave of Mexican people coming from Puebla to Philadelphia, to South Philadelphia specifically. And then from then there was a constant wave, but in the early 2000s, there was another large wave of Mexican people coming to South Philly. And then, constantly from then to the 2010s, there's a constant wave of migrants, both from Mexico and from Central America. But in 2010, 2012, between those years, we see the first big wave of Central Americans settling in South Philadelphia. And constantly, and ever since then until now, we see this constant wave of Central Americans, Mexicans coming to South Philly for many different reasons. And I also wanted to cover that majority, as I said, majority of the Mexican population that comes to South Philly or to Philadelphia are from this state in Mexico called Puebla. And that is, because Mexico is such a large country, the traditions and cultures differ in different regions of the country. And so Puebla is a very Catholic state. And so I think that that's something that the people bring to the city. In Honduras, there is a large they vary from the regions and where they come from. And so it wasn't easy to pinpoint where they come from, right? Because of the issues of their country. They were from San Vicente, and talked to another one saying they were from the capital, San Salvador. And as well as in Guatemala, Guatemalans primarily reside in North Philly. And so we see a little less of them here in South Philadelphia, but still are some of the larger populations that we serve here in Juntos. And one of the issues that we see with them in terms of accessing school or any other public service is that there's a language barrier, right? And it's not because there aren't people who speak Spanish, but there are people who are coming to this country that don't even speak Spanish, right? There are other languages in those nations that are indigenous to their roots. For example, my family, they came speaking a little bit more Spanish, but they had grown up speaking Nahuatl. And we've seen other youth members come and their families speak Quechua. And so it's these things that we try these bridges that we try to gap by providing services and having youth groups, spaces where they can feel like they are going to be supported and helped to get integrated into their new space.
Thank you, Lupe. And then really quickly, one thing that we thought was really important, and I think something that is often erased in mainstream media, is sort of the reason why folks migrate. And actually the fact that the decision to leave one's home country is actually not one that's made easily. It's a very serious one. It's often made because home countries are becoming unlivable due to economic, social, or environmental conditions. We list some factors here, but it's important to note that root causes of a lot of these factors are due to US imperialism or US capitalism. So for example, there was a large wave of Mexican immigrants who immigrated to Philadelphia after the implementation of NAFTA, which was a supposed free trade agreement in 1994 that left Mexican communities in Mexico completely disinvested. And I'm talking about like small Mexican-owned farms, for example, and sort of it became essentially impossible to make a living in their home country, which is why the majority moved to the US. And we just thought that was important. Very often the conversation about immigration is about, oh, they're here, they're coming, but not actually the reasons why they chose to come.
Thank you, Erika. And so now we want to touch on our Sanctuary Schools campaign, which is our education justice campaign that's informed by these experiences of Latinx immigrant families and how it aims to make the Philadelphia School District a welcoming place for all immigrant communities. One of the issues that we've seen with newcomer students is that they don't feel like they have the support to be fully integrated into their school with the lack of resources in their specific class, right? For example, I've helped families enroll into school where the student should be a senior, but because he doesn't require he doesn't fit the requirements to become a senior, they bump him down to be a freshman. And these are issues that they're like, oh, like I don't understand why I have to be with freshmen, and they just feel like displaced and isolated from these experiences. But also these are issues that community has named that they have named in their schools, and they feel like they need support in making these conditions where they feel comfortable.
So a little bit on sanctuary schools. Sanctuary schools are basically schools that are free of criminalization and surveillance from both internal and external forces. They're spaces where kids feel comfortable making mistakes and being kids, where they facilitate recognition, reflection, and being able to process emotions. Being able to learn from your mistakes is a part of growing, you know. I think we all make mistakes, and we all should be able to have the chance to learn from them instead of being punished for them. And we are fighting for people's rights to make mistakes and be able to have these spaces. Here is a picture from our campaign launch in front of the school district. And here are a few community members just holding up a few of the main points of our Sanctuary Schools platform.
Thank you. And so I wanted to go sort of like the seed or the spark, actually, I should say, that caused the launch of our campaign. So I know I saw some folks from Kirkbride join the call, so this is a familiar story, but I'm gonna just repeat it so that everyone's on the same page. So right before the pandemic started in 2020, February 2020, an undocumented immigrant mother who was pregnant at the time was detained by ICE agents after she dropped her child off at Kirkbride. The agents themselves were plainclothes agents in an unmarked car. Folks around the incident at the time didn't actually know what was happening. And there was also what was actually the most biggest thing that we learned from that incident is that there was actually no training or no formal guide on what to do in that incident. Not only for the case of the mother themselves, but also in general, a sort of line of defense around ICE enforcement. For a long time, and generally the general understanding is that schools are included as sensitive locations as part of ICE's policy. on where not to hold any form of ICE enforcement. But what we've seen time and time again is that ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is a rogue agency that many times will aim to do detentions not only at schools, but also in hospitals, for example. And so this is sort of the spark that began a conversation meaningfully in our communities on sort of what the Philadelphia School District was doing to meaningfully protect immigrant families. But then what we saw just a month later is the pandemic arrived, right? That was something else entirely, right? And what we saw actually, and what our community saw, is that nothing was done to actually formally address the incident. And so essentially was put to the side when the pandemic arrived. But one thing I'm always really proud to say is that our community didn't forget. Juntos members did not forget. And we actually began really intentional conversations with the mother herself, and also other community members on what we believe to be the correct response. And I do want to mention that this mother is still here now. She had her baby. Her family's doing well. But I just wanted to mention that before I go into the next slide. So it's not just the issue of this incident of ICE enforcement. I think this, the incident that happened at Kirkbride actually opened up for a larger conversation on the different issues that immigrant community members were feeling within the school district. And some of it dates back long before us. For example, the massive school closures in South Philadelphia, like Bach High School, which was the last vocational high school in that neighborhood. But other issues that were more revealed during the pandemic. So for example, language access. Many parents mention having to wait hours for a counselor or an interpreter to be able to communicate with their child's teacher. Issues of cultural sensitivity. We talk about the different languages that exist in Latin America and how often there are communities like put into one single box. And doesn't actually acknowledge like the indigenous history of a lot of our community members. And also more recently, and this is something that we're really intently focusing on now as part of our campaign and within our work, as you might have noticed, is the importance of the ability to respond to the new needs of immigrant communities who are recently arriving. So for example, there's a wide range of Central American families that are arriving and Central American youth who are recently arrived within the last couple of weeks, within the last year. And one thing to mention is a majority of these young people actually go through the Office of Refugee and Resettlement, which is essentially a form of detention. So that's a whole nother population of young people that have very different needs than, for example, the children of Mexican immigrants 10 years ago. And so this is sort of our campaign is actually asking to respond not only to this incident that happened at Kirkbride, apologies, but also the other issues that impact our community. Schools that are, students that face criminalization, failing infrastructure. Ashley attends a school that has issues of asbestos, language barriers, and also the lack of community control in schools as well.
Thank you, Erika. So some of you may or may not know that Philadelphia is a sanctuary city. And so you might ask yourself, like, how is this possible? As Erika mentioned, where ICE has put in place these policies of sensitive location. And so I'm going to go over a little bit of history over like what does sanctuary mean and how, and the history of Philadelphia being a sanctuary city. So it became a sanctuary city in 2014 under then Mayor Michael Nutter. So to become a sanctuary city is to stop collaboration between ICE and the police. But however, when Nutter left office, he rescinded the status, meaning it put a lot of our community members in risk of being detained, or if they had received or they had been arrested for a red light or any other instances. And this speaks about, however, when Mayor Kenny came into office on his first day, he reinstated that status. But that speaks to the importance of having protections for our communities, despite the status of the city. And so this happened in November of 2015. and people and community members, other organizations like New Century Movement, Be It Lead, AAU, all rallied outside of the city hall asking for the mayor to keep the city a sanctuary city. But because he took a position with DHS, he decided that his power move was to rescind this policy.
Thank you, Lupe. So we detail a little bit about like the municipal policy to maintain Philadelphia as a sanctuary city, which essentially means, right, no collaboration between the Philadelphia police and ICE and customs enforcement. That unfortunately does not protect communities from federal attacks. So just to detail very quickly, one thing that we saw, for example, under the administration of Trump is that across the country, sanctuary cities were being attacked, including in Philadelphia. And we'll show a picture in the next slide, actually, of something that, of a protest that happened when Pence visited that kind of outlined that. But what happens because the city maintains its sanctuary cities policy, it's often very specifically targeted by immigrations and customs enforcement. So very often we see massive raids in Philadelphia, which can't be stopped due to that's a federal act, right? Earlier this year, we saw DHS Secretary Mayorkas literally ask sanctuary cities to stop abiding by their own sanctuary city policies and start cooperating with immigration and customs enforcement. And one thing that we've seen actually over the last few months is that we have seen a rise in community arrests in Philadelphia. Community arrests, that's defined as ICE agents out in communities. I'm talking neighborhoods outside of people's homes, picking folks up due to suspended PD guidelines. And PD guidelines, very quickly, are the prosecutorial discretion guidelines that are essentially what were marching orders for the ICE agency that Biden enacted. It was challenged by a court and so are no longer in place. And essentially what that means is ICE can essentially dictate on their own who they're supposed to go after. The PD guidelines for a while sort of outlined like, no one who has this kind of charge or less is a priority for detention or deportation. We no longer have that. Essentially, anyone who is an undocumented person living in this country is under threat by immigration and customs enforcement. And another thing I want to add, and we'll detail as part of this presentation, is that there is a new mega detention center that opened up in the last year that is actually based in Pennsylvania. And this detention center is 5 hours from the city. It has capacity for 1,800 people, but it only has 900 now. And so what we're seeing actually is that there's a push to fill those beds because someone, the private company that runs that center is likely losing money. And we want to mention this just because sanctuary, it should be more realized as a broader term and sort of just outlining different ways that it is circumvented by ICE. And this is just a quick photo when former Vice President Pence visited Philadelphia in 2017, I believe. So this is just a protest sort of, again, pushing Philadelphia leadership to maintain the policy and take a broader, stronger stance against the current the presidential administration at the time. And then for a little bit of context, that's Rocky in the banner. Community members, we love Rocky. So the idea was sort of like, he's like the like folk hero that would help like defend our city. And then just to add one more piece, so we do have, we have the municipal policy itself, sort of the circumventions that we're seeing at like the federal level, but then there's also a very specific impact locally due to the fact that the Philadelphia ICE office is actually one of the most aggressive ICE offices in the country. So what that means is that they are much more likely to mark specific cases as being eligible for detention or deportation, denying parole, setting really high bonds, etc. One thing that we saw in 2017 is that the Philadelphia ICE office arrested more undocumented immigrants without any kind of record, more than any other office in the country. That being said, I want to name very quickly that Juntos does not allow ourselves to be dictated by respectability politics. We believe that all of our community deserves to stay here, and that the idea of like model minorities, et cetera, are used to divide our people, and actually detract from our power that we built together. And then one thing I wanted to add, this is new, is that the Philadelphia ICE office also increased their use of virtual detention. That's essentially ankle bracelets. So that's something that is being used a lot more now. It increased by 115%. And you might hear like, oh, well, someone might want to be home instead of with an ankle bracelet and be in detention. Of course, right? But actually an ankle bracelet or digital detention itself is deeply dehumanizing, and also has privacy concerns, and also opens up other family members or anyone that person might be living with to more danger. And there's also no clarity on how that program is dictated or who's labeled as like eligible for it. Okay, so I'm talking about a lot of different things. I think for us, we wanted to name really clear all the different threats that exist for the immigrant community so that you can all be informed around it. And so we want to go into more detail about detention. So under Biden, immigrant detention has expanded by nearly 50%. And this is a president who ran his campaign on that, right? Saying that he would reduce detention and end private prisons, right? And unfortunately, what we see is that there's nearly 50% more, 2 new detention centers in our state alone. Pennsylvania has the largest footprint of immigrant detention beds in this part of the country. And then that doesn't include, as we mentioned, the number of folks who are in digital detention. So right now there's around 20,000 people, 22,000 or so in physical detention centers across the country, but there's 280,000 folks who are in digital detention programs as well. So just to name really quickly the different detention centers that exist in Pennsylvania. The first one is Berks. You all as educators might have actually heard about this detention center. It was one of 3 family detention centers in Pennsylvania. So it's about 2 hours away. Family detention centers mean just that. Like they detained families there. I think the youngest person that we heard of was a 6-week-old baby. So for years, the Shutdown Berks Coalition organized for the shutdown of this campaign, and that was won in 2021. But later in 2022, under Biden's administration, this detention center was reopened as a women's only detention center in Pennsylvania. And now is a new detention center open under Biden just 2 hours away from our city. I wanted to just give some background on York. This detention center is actually no longer in operation, but it's an important one to know because it actually was like the gateway point for the expansion of detention in our state. So York was the largest detention center at the time. There were years and years of organizing against it. Juntos included had a shutdown campaign against the facility. Like I mentioned, it was the largest at the time, and it closed last year in August. Leading up to that closure, Juntos was successful with a coalition of partners to release 115 people of the folks detained there. You might hear like, oh, a detention center gets closed, they're gonna let the people out, right? That's not how that works. These ICE, private detention companies, they wanna keep that money, so they transfer folks to other states just to keep that quota. And that's what happened with York. We were really focused on getting folks out, and at the same time, there were backyard dealings to open another detention center, which I'll detail right now. But I just wanted to mention this detention center, like for context on just like how insidious the immigrant imprisonment industry is. So this is Moshannon. So Moshannon is that mega detention center that I mentioned. So we learned this place is about it's actually 5 hours. I made the drive myself with a community organizer. It's around 5 hours away. It is the largest detention center in the Northeast. So it serves as a hub of detention for this entire part of the country, capacity of 1,800 people. Again, this is a new detention center opened under Biden, goes directly against his campaign promises. It's run by a private company. So when you hear private, you have to think about like profit, that sort of thing, right? And it's run by GEO Group, which is known for its human rights abuses. And Moshannon has capacity for 1,800 people. Currently right now is only holding 900. But in the last couple of weeks, like I've mentioned, we've heard a rise of issues of community arrests in Philadelphia, but also from our contacts in other parts of the country. For example, a friend of someone that I know in Baltimore messaged me and told me that someone that they knew went in for a check-in into the ICE office, should have been in and out. By that afternoon was at Moshannon. And that's very much motivated by private interests and the urge to build private profits. And this is actually one of the biggest threats to our community right now. And we wanted to detail it for you all because there's actually no real pathway to citizenship right now for anyone. You might have heard of the program DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That is not a pathway to citizenship. It is a temporary work permit program that is very tenuous. Community members of our staff that are in that program live under uncertainty of whether that program will be continued. It's also not accepting new applicants. And like I mentioned, because there's no, the prosecutorial guidelines are suspended right now, literally anyone who is undocumented is at threat of all the things that we mentioned. And that includes your students, it includes their parents, and it includes their family members.
Thank you, Erika. So yeah, as Erika mentioned, sanctuary is more than just protection from ICE, right? Because of the Mayor Michael Nutter, we saw that, that could be sanctuary, the status of a sanctuary city can be taken out very, very easily. And it's important for us to build sanctuary at every level of our community for the well-being of our parents, of our youth. And so this is why we built this campaign, or why our community chose to build this campaign.
So our campaign is based on this 5-point platform you guys see right here, with number 1 being we want schools to be free of criminalization. Criminalization being metal detectors, being security, being cameras, being stuff like that, because when we walk into school and we see these things, we already feel criminalized and we feel like we're walking into a prison. Number 2 is we want a reinvestment in the education of our young people, meaning a lot of the schools in Philadelphia are old, especially with this new year. We saw that a lot of schools were shut down because our buildings were too hot, and a lot of our own youth here at Juntos in our youth group, they came in after school and they were talking about how hot it was and how they were sweating and how they had to stay there the whole day because they just had to, and there was no air conditioning and they were sweating the whole day. So that shouldn't be something that we have to sit through. That should be something that we should already have. That's a basic need, Number 3 is we want a culturally responsive pedagogy that teaches about our true history. Because Philadelphia is really diverse, there's a bunch of communities. When we go into school, we learn American history, we learn African American history, being the first step into learning more about POC communities and other history that directly correlates with students from other backgrounds. Number 4, we demand community control of our schools because our community make up these schools. Our community knows what we need, and we go to these schools every single day. So we know what we need to transform our schools. And our last point being number 5, we want schools that are places of healing. A lot of students have problems at home, or may have problems at home, may have other things that they have to deal with outside of school. So really, when they go into school, they should just feel comfortable, and there should be an adult that they can go to if they're ever feeling like they need to talk to someone, and making sure that they just feel like they can make mistakes and be kids, really. This is a picture of our campaign launch. It says, no hay ciudades santuarios sin escuelas santuarios. There's no sanctuary cities without sanctuary schools. Like we said, sanctuary cities are cities without ICE. So to make this a real, true sanctuary city, we need schools that ICE are not allowed to go into. And again, sanctuary is more than just protection from ICE. Sanctuary is really just making sure that students can go into school and learn and don't have to face these problems that we really shouldn't, that are basic necessities to us, that we should already have air conditioning, like infrastructure problems. These are things that should already be solved before we even go into school. And just feeling safe overall. The next slide, this is this photo actually makes me really happy every time I see it. These are our youth from Foresight with a bunch of other organizations here in Philadelphia that make up the Our Schools Coalition. This was when we were protesting outside of the Philadelphia School District building for infrastructure problems. And it was just really a great experience. Here's everyone, and it was raining this day. But really, we shouldn't have to do this. We should already have this. And this is part of our Sanctuary Schools campaign. To translate this really quickly, here is now our civic engagement leader. Her name is Maria, and she was saying in this photo that I want schools to waste less money on metal detectors and more on our education, because a lot of our money does go to metal detectors and surveillance and stuff like that, when it should really be going into our education, making sure our teachers have the supplies that they need, making sure that we have the notebooks, new notebooks that we need every year, making sure like we have these basic things that we need as students. And yeah.
Thank you, Ashley. And so, right, so what have we done to push towards these points? So we started with our first point of getting our schools free of criminalization. And so we presented a resolution to the school board on the day of our launch. And so the resolution included the removal of metal detectors and surveillance equipment in schools, because students don't feel like that they can grow in these spaces where they're being watched, where they're being treated like criminals. And it didn't include, and so then we presented this to the Board of Education, and they sent us back a copy where they believe that they could fulfill these parts. However, their initial resolution did not include a community accountability portion where we would ask them, the school board and the school district, to ensure that these things were happening, that the resolution was moving, that there was training for teachers, that there was the policy of blocking ICE and police from schools and receiving information from students was being enforced and was being protected. And so we turned to our membership and we asked them if they agreed and if they were okay or happy with this resolution that the school board had presented us, and they did not. They wanted to work to make a better resolution. And so in the resolution that we edited from the one that they gave us, was any block for ICE receiving any information from students, whether that be, a conversation that a teacher had with a student, and it was told to like the vice principal, and it kind of casually came out, and also providing an emergency response plan if anyone in the community was arrested or was affected or by an arrest or a detainment. And also that within the first 100 days, the implementation plan would be finalized, that there would be a plan for how to train and let teachers and administrators and staff, volunteers, anyone who ever comes in contact with students, be aware of what it is that they're supposed to do to respond with the presence of ICE at their school or around their school. And also providing this portion of accountability, and ensuring that there is some sort of community control of this policy and of this implementation plan, because we want our community to feel that they are being listened to, that they have a say in how they keep their students, their youth safe. And so very briefly, this is our timeline of the work that we've done. So the mom was arrested outside of Kirkbride in February 2020. Philadelphia shuts down due to COVID in March of 2020. And then from December to January, Juntos released a survey asking teachers and administrators what they knew about the policy that was in place when the arrest happened. And around 75% of teachers and administrators said that they didn't even know that there was a policy in the district. And then from January to March, we had conversations with communities to create this platform and to create this community-led campaign. And then in March, we launched our campaign. From March to July, we had conversations with community about the resolution and came out with a resolution that they were okay with, as a first step, knowing that this wasn't going to be perfect, that the resolution that was presented by the Board of Education was just the first step and wasn't the final point of this campaign. And then after conversations with the Board of Education and community members in June of 2021, the Board of Education passed the resolution unanimously, providing this sanctuary for school in schools for our youth. And then we got an implementation plan in October 21, and there was some problematic implementation plan policies in there. One being that the school district would, or the teacher, if ICE presented a valid warrant, that they would provide a space for ICE to interview the student inside the school. And we believe that did not align with what we were trying to achieve. And so we pushed back onto that, meaning that the implementation plan was not implemented until passing December 2021. And so because we wanted to get ahead and make sure that someone in our schools knew what to do because of these instances, we held trainings in March of 2022. And from then we've done work with the infrastructure part of our campaign. We've talked to more other community members and have had conversations with other educators. And this is a picture of when we won, when the resolution was passed. We had a celebration outside of Kirkbride because we wanted the community to feel this win, right? Even if it was a small win, we wanted to celebrate with them and create. And this was a time where they didn't feel safe, where they didn't feel protected, and so we wanted to kind of change the space and be like, okay, remember this as a space of celebration and of community.
Thank you, Lupe. And I want to add really quickly that the mother who was detained actually came to our celebration. And I mentioned she was pregnant at the time. So she came with the 5-year-old daughter that she had been dropping off, and also the baby that she was pregnant with. So it felt like we were really cleaning the energy of the space. Yeah, and then in the chat, I noticed I'm going to drop we're just going to quickly review. I know that some folks mentioned that you already participated in the professional development won by the resolution, but we're also offering an additional resource document with additional details on what to do if you see ICE in schools, but also in your community. So very quickly, we just wanted to run through this, what should you do if you see ICE near your school. Go ahead, Lupe. And then in the chat, I'll drop the form where you can get a document that details what else you can do if you see ICE in your communities. So you are meant, so actually everyone here who's not, I believe everyone here is a teacher, you're actually, you're meant to alert your principal immediately and not provide any information about your student or their family to the ICE agent. Next slide, Lupe. One thing that we fought really hard to win is actually to make sure that the ICE agents do not get in the school. The original resolution said, oh yeah, they could wait inside somewhere. That was not, we were like, that is unallowed. That should not be an option. So now the ICE agents need to be escorted out of the building by the principal and kept outside and away from students and families at all times. And from there, the principal, actually has to notify the Office of General Counsel, and that is actually the main intermediary for any requests for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There should be no way that the ICE agent gets in contact with the family whatsoever. And then from there, as part of that process, the principal must get any documentation from the agent to share copies with OGC, for example, just making sure it's a valid warrant, right? And then that itself is not something that you have to, that you have the authority to decide. That's, again, the Office of General Counsel. So it's super quick. I'm dropping something in the chat that details that in more detail. It's a really nice art piece that we are giving to free to educators, but it also details what to see, what to do if you see ICE in community.
Hey, Erika, just real quick, Lupe's computer just had a little malfunction. So if you could share your screen really quickly. Sorry for that technical difficulty, everyone.
Fortunately, it seems like I might not be able to share.
Okay. While we're working on that, I am going to try to drop a couple of links in the chat, but I have to find those links because they disappeared. For teachers, as you're, I'm going to drop in the chat the upcoming presentations in addition to this presentation that we'll be having. There are a number of others throughout this month, and we hope that you can come. And are you guys still going, or are you just needing to wait for your slides?
Yeah, we just have the video to share, but I'm not able to share. I'm not sure why. But I also
Lupe said she, oh, I'm so sorry. Lupe said she'll be able to jump on. Yeah, her computer just shut down randomly, but she's getting everything. It should be right back up.
Okay. I'm also going to drop into, I'm also going to drop in 2 links for those of you that are watching. Teachers, you will need to, if you signed in through Cornerstone, you actually will need to fill out 2 forms tonight. If you didn't sign in through Cornerstone and got this through the bit.ly, there's only 1 form for everybody. So I'm dropping in the first form. This will give you, if you are an educator, Act 48 credit, but also gives us feedback on our programs. And the second form, the link that I will be dropping in will be for the folks that actually process the payment for PD through Cornerstone. So if you did sign in through Cornerstone, you're going to need to fill out the second form, which I will drop in here. And well, I know we're waiting for.
Yes, so sorry, I'm back.
Yeah,
I can start sharing my screen. Can I have?
okay, because I did have a question for you, Erica. Like, I know that a lot of the folks, I want to like kind of put our heads in terms of the world. And when we look to Europe and we see Ukrainian refugees coming over borders, and we see Syrian refugees coming over borders, and they're escaping, and they're applying for political asylum. My understanding is that a lot of the folks that are arriving on our borders are also applying for political asylum, and they have pending cases. And so, as in any other country in the world that honors human rights, for people who are running away from situations like that, are the ICE officers, you know, actually, I don't even know if that's a violation of the law to detain and deport people that, or the violation of international human rights standards to detain and deport people that have applied for political asylum?
Yeah, I mean, actually what we're seeing, so the majority, the the population of folks who are able to arrive into the U.S. With valid cases of asylum or as refugees are actually a very, 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 very small fraction of the folks who are actually presented at the border. The majority of folks at the border are either denied their asylum cases and immediately deported, or put in detention. And they're actively either trying to make a case for their status when they get deported. I think you put even an option in the a description in the chat. A lot of times folks are deported even before they get their hearing, right, for credible fear. And I think just one thing that we see in general is that there's very different types of forms of treatment for refugees or immigrants due to anti-Blackness and racism. I mean, if, for example, if you looked at the treatment of Haitian refugees at the border just a year ago, right, that, of course, I think was a huge violation of human rights. Absolutely. And I think it was very much motivated by anti-Blackness, actually.
Okay, thank you. And if anyone also has additional questions that you want to drop in the chat, please feel free to do so. I don't, Guadalupe, are you going to show the video?
Yes, I can. I just need sharing privileges again, please.
Oh, let me see. Ish was doing all this and I can't. I know our session was supposed to end at 6, so I know that for teachers, I think this is okay. Let me see, where are you?
We can, of course, also share this video if that's better, Deb. You can let us know. It's a 5-minute long video that kind of details what sanctuary schools mean for Latinx families in Philadelphia.
Yeah. For those of you that need to jump, that's understandable. Please fill out the evaluation forms, and why don't we go ahead and show the video for those of us that can stay on. And if you have any questions, please be sure to drop them in the chat.
Okay, fair warning to the headphone wearers. It does start off a little loud.
Hoy te voy a compartir una historia de cómo a mi hija le pasó a muchos estudiantes inmigrantes dentro del Distrito Escolar de Filadelfia. Desde que mi hija tenía 12 años, tenía que tomar una responsabilidad que no le corresponde, el trabajo de intérprete. La misma escuela, por la habilidad de realizar su trabajo básico de proveer un intérprete, estaba obstaculizando la educación de mi hija. Esta historia no es única, es una historia que comparten muchas madres y estudiantes inmigrantes. Estoy aquí para decirles que no tiene que ser así. Estoy aquí para presentar la otra alternativa de escuelas santuarios. ¿Se puede o no se puede? ¡Sí se puede! ¿Se puede o no se puede? ¡Sí se puede!
Our campaign is a community response critically outlining the need for a truer commitment from the District of Philadelphia to ensure our youth and parents are safe from criminalization, from failing infrastructure, from language barriers, and those that seek to make decisions that impact the well-being and education of our people without a direct conversation.
Okay. What sanctuary school means to me are schools that we as kids and students feel safe in. I want like schools to stop criminalizing students. I want schools to stop spending their money on metal detectors and start spending their money on books and the laptops and for their education. I want schools to start spending more money on counselors and nurses. For every 900 students, there's one counselor and one nurse, and I just don't think that's okay. I want schools to start putting our mental and physical health first.
I came here today because the students had enough. The school district has failed us time and time again, from massive school closings, the roof falling down at Palumbo, and the unsafe dripping water due to neglected pipes. We want safe schools, free of police, free of ICE, free of any criminalizing forces like metal detectors and surveillance. We want safe schools, places where we're able to embrace who we are and learn about where we come from. This is what we mean when we say sanctuary schools. This is what my community needs to truly feel safe, and we're not going to stop fighting until we get it.
Piensan asustarme para que te deje, pero nunca nadie lo podrá lograr.
Yo no lo podía creer cuando fue, yo grité en mi casa, grité y dije, sí se puede, esto es una ganancia para la comunidad, es un empujoncito más. Yo me sentí personalmente como que alivianada de que escucharan, comprendieran lo que está pasando en las escuelas.
Yo soy de los hombres que no temen nada.
I was watching the live stream when the school board voted on it, and it took my breath away once it finally passed.
With this resolution, we will be provided with protection for our community. It will make sure teachers know how to protect students, and it will bring peace to minds to students knowing that at such a young age there are people to protect them and their families instead of them having to take on that role. We can push ICE out of our neighborhoods, out of our schools, and our city. When we demonstrated how powerful our community was last week, we showed we can be the change.
Esto no se termina aquí, esto sigue por nuestros hijos, por nuestros amigos, por todos los niños que merecen esta educación. Y lo que espero es que el distrito escolar siga abriendo oídos y ojos para que escuche más a la comunidad y este sea un paso tras otro, pero para adelantar y que realmente Filadelfia sea una ciudad de fraternidad y amor, pero también de educación fuerte con nuestros niños.
Los mariachilocos quieren comer, los mariachilocos quieren comer. Quieren comer los mariachilocos, quieren comer los mariachilocos.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was everything on our end. We do have some resources as well, but what we're going to do is we'll make sure to share the full slide deck with Deb so she can share it with you all. And I'm going to drop my email in the chat if you have any questions.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you all so much. If you have logistical questions, I'll be on for a while, but I think all the rest of y'all, if you want to come off mic, can just say thank you to Juntos for the work that they're doing to make schools better for all of our children. We're very grateful.
Thank you so much. Coming from a Kirkbride teacher, we really appreciate you.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that I'm sure that made your day.
They make my day. Actually, one of my former students works with you guys too, Nadalyn. She is my heart, my heart. She just asked me for a recommendation for college. I love her.
She's a staff member now. She's a junior organizer too.
Yes, in between playing soccer too. She's playing soccer now too. I love it. So Deborah, real quick, I filled out the first Act 48 form and I put 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock because that's what I'm so used to doing. So I just submitted another one from 5 to 6.
Okay.
I just wanted to tell somebody so they didn't think I was trying to.
Don't worry about it. We're all good, Stacey.
Thanks so much. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Know that we have lots of other programs coming up this month. Our next one will be with Johanna Fernandez, and she'll be talking about the Young Lords and the history in Philadelphia. So please don't miss that. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Want to see if there's any more questions out there? I think folks are good. Juntos folks, thank you so much. I think that was just really amazing for folks to hear. And I think what's heartwarming to me is how much the teachers who are the front line in all of this like support your work. It may not seem like that at times, and it may seem like the district's a little hard to move, but there are lots of us who understand what's going on and really want to support the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us again. It meant a lot to us. And in the chat, I'm gonna send you the link to the presentation. That way you don't have to download it. It's like a live, I can email it to you too.
Yeah,
but the link
okay.
will give them the full presentation.
Cool.
I have it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you all had a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be talking to you again about like doing some more stuff.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Okay,
day.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.